Hi everyone, welcome back. I know that I haven't posted a video in a little bit, and that's just because I've been really busy, but I'm really excited for this one. I started it like a couple months ago, I want to say, and I just finished it and it's super cute. I feel like it's perfect timing for how much the weather has been warming up recently. It just suits the vibe of summer so much. I love it. It's a filet crochet top. It's basically like an open back design. It has a strap for the behind your neck and then a strap for behind your back. So cute. It's made with this beautiful golden thread. It has like little golden pieces in it. I had another video that I uploaded about a month ago, and I had made a filet crochet top in that video, but that was the first time I'd ever made one. And so that was more of a design vlog, walking you through things that I do when I'm trying to learn something new. And this one is going to be more of like a tutorial, like a how to actually do it. Because the first one I was teaching myself, and this one I'm going to try to teach you. I still don't know like 100% everything there is to know about filet crochet or like crochet in general. Like I'm still learning as a crochet artist. So if it's not 100% perfect, I apologize for that. Filet crochet can be a little tricky with the measurements and just it's very specific, I think. So it can be a little tricky that way, but I'm going to try my best to explain how I understand it, and I hope that makes sense to you guys, but let me know if anyone's confused and I can try to word it differently. I'm just gonna like explain right now kind of how filet crochet works. It's kind of similar to tapestry crochet in the way that you follow a grid to create like this flat pattern. When you're following a grid, each of the boxes is basically equal to 2 stitches. But looking at it up close, we're always working in double crochets. So there's a double crochet here, and it creates this box by skipping a stitch and chaining one and then double crocheting into the next stitch. So that's how you create the box. And then to just fill in the box, you just fill it in with a double crochet instead of skipping the stitch. Moving on to how I create my graph that I follow. I use the website Stitch Fiddle, and it helps you kind of like create your own graph. I think I just made a blank one based off my measurements, and then I just kind of like drew in what I wanted. And so the open boxes are basically the white spaces, and then the black boxes are the filled in boxes that you do. And so to create that graph, you need to know your measurements and the measurements of the gauge square that you're going to be using for the project. So I used a lace weight crochet thread, which is size 0, and a 1.5 millimeter hook. So if you're using those exact things, you can just use the measurements that I got based off my gauge square. But if you're not, if you're using a different size weight yarn or a different hook size, then you need to create your own gauge square and measure it accordingly to input your measurements. So when I create my gauge square, I just went by 10 boxes horizontally and 10 boxes vertically. I measured my boxes, and again, I'm just holding it upside down. I measured 10 boxes horizontally to be 2 inches. And then I did that vertically, and that was 2.15 inches. Knowing the measurements of the gauge square, I then measured how big I actually wanted the graph to be. So I knew that it was going to be a front style graph, and I knew it was just going to be like this square here. And I found that I wanted it to be 14 inches, and then I measured it to be this way underneath down to like the top of my jeans, and that was 7 inches. So now I have all of my measurements. I'm just gonna have to do a little bit of math to figure out how many boxes we need. So we're gonna start with our horizontal measurement, which for me was 14 inches. That's how long I wanted it to be horizontally. So taking that and taking the horizontal measurement of how long 10 boxes were, remember I found that to be 2. We're gonna do our measurement divided by how long the boxes were. So 14 divided by 2. And that is equal to 7. And then we're going to multiply that by 10 because that's how many boxes were in the measurement. 7 times 10 is 70. That's how many boxes I knew that I wanted for the graph. So now that we have the horizontal number of boxes, we can do the vertical number of boxes. remember my measurement was 7, and then the measurement of the number of boxes of the 10 boxes vertically was 2.15. So I'm going to take 7 divide by 2.15, which was like 3.2, and then you multiply that by 10, because again we did the measurement for 10 boxes vertically, and so I found that to be 32. So I knew that I wanted my grid to be 70 boxes by 32 boxes. So going back to my computer where I made my grid, on Stitch Fiddle you can just create your own graph and then have the measurements to be what you wanted. So I made mine 70 boxes by 32 boxes, and I just used that to follow along. Now that I know how many boxes I want, I know how many chains that I have to do to get there. Since 1 box is equal to 2 chains, we just take our number of boxes and we multiply that by 2. And we're working horizontally, so I have to take my horizontal number, which is 70 boxes, multiply that 2 is 140 chains. Make sure that you always add 2 chains to that for the turning chain. So it's 140 chains plus 2. So if you measure to have 80 boxes, that's 160 chains, and then always add 2 to that for the turning chain. I will put all of the formulas for the measurements in the description, all of the extra pattern stuff in there. Anyways, let's just get crocheting. So I have my thread here. I'm using this golden thread. It's a metallic gold, size 0, the lace weight, and then a 1.5 millimeter hook. I'm just starting here doing a slip knot. And then based on my measurements and calculations, I'm going to chain 140 and then plus 2 for the turning chain. So I have my 140 chains plus 2 for the turning chain. I'm going to be working in the back loops, so the third loops from the chain. This just helps make it a little stretchier. And I'm going to start by going into the 4th loop from my hook. So again, this is just the back of the chain. You can just do it normally if you want, but I find that this way just makes it a little bit stretchier. So I'm going to do a double crochet into that one. And then following the filet crochet, I'm chaining 1, skipping 1 stitch, and going into the next stitch with a double crochet. And chaining 1 again, skipping a stitch, and going into the next stitch with a double crochet. So as we go along, we can see how this kind of creates little boxes that we'll be using for our graph. And I'm just going to show here how I create a filled in box. So we've been doing empty boxes by skipping a stitch, but to make a filled in box, I'm not going to skip a stitch or chain 1. I'm just going to go in with a double crochet right into the next stitch. And then another double crochet to complete that box, and so that's a filled in box. So I'm just finishing up the row here, putting in my last double crochets. It'll take you right to the end, and then that's the first row all complete. I did already do some filled in boxes just based off of my pattern. So moving on to row 2, as we start each row, we're going to start by chaining 3 and then turning our work. And so this will count as like a double crochet. And so we're skipping the first stitch and just going into the double crochet there that we did from the previous round. And then we're continuing with our chain 1 and then skipping a stitch and going into the double crochet. And then I'm just finishing up the last stitch in this row. It can be a little hard to see, but I'm just putting my last double crochet there. And then as we start every row, gonna chain 3, turn our work, and keep going with the pattern. Continue to follow along to your graph to fill in the boxes or leave them empty. I have my all finished graph here. I'm just marking the middle with a little pin, and then just taking my yarn. I never cut it off, so I'm just going to continue using it and chaining 2, and then just turning my work and working into every single stitch. I'm going to put a double crochet to make that a solid double crochet line. And I'm working until I reach the middle stitch marker. Make sure to place your last stitch in where you put the stitch marker. For the next row, I'm going to start by chaining 2 and then turning my work. The first 2 stitches I'm going to do a decrease, so I'm yarning over and going into that very first stitch, pulling up a loop, yarning over and pulling through 2 loops. And then I'm yarning over again and going into the next stitch, pulling up a loop, yarning over, pull through 2, and yarning over, pull through 3. So that was a decrease, and now I'm just going to be working regular double crochets across the row. As I get to my last 2 stitches, I'm yarning over, going through the first stitch, yarning over, pull through 2, yarn over into the very last stitch, yarn over, pull through 2, and then yarn over, pull through 3, and that's a decrease at the end. And to continue each round, I'm just going to chain 2 to start, turn our work, and then at the beginning of each row, we're going to do a decrease, followed by just double crocheting across the row, and then a decrease in the last 2 stitches at the end. And I'm going to repeat this decreasing all the way until there are 3 stitches left. After doing decreases from the first 2 stitches and the last 2 stitches of each row, I'm now down to 3 stitches. I'm just going to do one more by chaining 2, turning my work, doing 1 decrease into these first 2 stitches, and then just a regular double crochet into the last stitch. And I'm just going to tie my yarn and cut it off. For the other side, I'm just going to start on the side again, like how I did with the other one, and I'm just going to attach that yarn right in the corner. I'm just pulling the yarn through and then tying a knot. So just inserting my hook back into that spot where I tied the yarn. I'm gonna pull up a loop and then chain 2. I'm gonna put a double crochet into each stitch, so in each of the spaces and in each of the double crochet stitches. just working to the end of where the stitch marker is. I'm going to take the stitch marker out and then place my last double crochet into that spot where the stitch marker was. I'm starting the next row with a chain 2, and then I'm just going to turn my work. And then exactly like how we did with the other side, we're just going to do a decrease for the first 2 stitches and the last 2 stitches of each row. As I get to the last 2 stitches of the row, I'm just going to decrease them. It can be a little tricky to find the stitches. There we go, that's the end, and then I'm just going to chain 2 and turn my work, and then repeating the same thing with a decrease at the beginning with the first 2 stitches, and then a decrease at the end with the last 2 stitches. So repeat this until you get down to 3 stitches. And this is what it should look like. Make sure you don't cut the yarn after finishing the second triangle. So just continuing to work with the yarn at the top of the triangle, we're just going to make a chain that measures 20 inches, or however long that you measure it to be. And now we're going to be working back down the chain by doing slip stitches. So skipping the first stitch, going into the second stitch from my hook, I'm just going to put a slip stitch like so, and then just continuing along that, just going into the top of the chain, the top loop of the chain. So I'm just doing my last slip stitch in the chain, and then I'm just going to turn it slightly and then put a slip stitch into the stitch where we started the chain from, and then putting a slip stitch into the stitch to the left of that. Continuing with our working yarn, we're just going to clean up the edge of the triangle a little bit. So I'm just going to do single crochets into the sides, just along the edge. I didn't really have a method for this. I just kind of tried to evenly space them out and find little gaps where I could put the hook. I'm just continuing along with the single crochets until I reach the row that's second from the bottom with the triangle. So it's second from the bottom. I'm just going to line up with the other triangle to make sure that it's even. I'm just lining it up with the other side, and I'm going to slip stitch into the same spot where I have on my triangle, so just go straight across. I'm just slip stitching the 2 of them together. And then I'll continue with my single crochets, just working along that edge again, doing the same thing that we did going down on the other side. As we reach the top of the triangle, I'm just doing my last single crochet there, and then we're going to do the same thing that we did with the other side with the strap. We're just going to chain until we reach 20 inches long. I have my chain that measures 20 inches. I'm going to do the same thing by skipping the first stitch, going into the second stitch from my hook and doing a slip stitch. And then I'm going to do that all the way down this chain, just slip stitching into the top of each stitch. I'm doing my last slip stitch there, and then I'm going to do a slip stitch into the stitch where we did the chain from, and then doing a slip stitch into the next stitch. And then just working along that edge, doing our single crochets again until we reach the bottom of the triangle and the top of the filet graph. Alright, I'm at the bottom of the triangle and the top of the filet graph, right at that point there. And we're going to do the same thing we did with the other straps, although we're going to chain it to be a little bit longer this time. I'm going to do it so that it measures 30 inches. And same process, skipping the first stitch, going into the second stitch from our hook and slip stitching all the way down the chain. Putting in my last slip stitch there. And then we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing for along the edge of the triangles. We're just going to go in with single crochets all the way around the edge. And so to turn the corner, I'm going to do a single crochet into that space, chain one, and do another single crochet into the same space. And it's just easier to weave the tail as you go, and then just continue with our single crochets. This corner is the same thing. I'm going to single crochet into the last corner stitch, chain one, and then single crochet into the same space, and then I'll turn my work and work along that other side. Again, we're stopping just at the base of the triangle and the top of the filet graph, and we're going to do our last strap. Just going to measure to make sure it's the same spot on each side, and then we're just going to do a chain all the way that measures to be 30 inches long. And again, the same process of slip stitching down the chain until we reach the bottom. So we made it all the way down. We're going to do our last row of single crochets to complete that edge to make it nice and straight all the way to the top. And to end it off, I'm just going to put a slip stitch into that very top stitch of the triangle and tie it off and cut it. This is what it looks like. Super cute. Perfect for like a summer beach day. It's giving Love Island vibes, for they're by the beach all summer. I love it. Thanks for watching.